Thanks for having us. So maybe start with the title, because I think when you look at the title and now in hindsight, it looks like the word cloud of the day so far. But we heard about democratization of insights, we heard about AI, we heard about knowledge management, all that stuff. So I think, first of all, it tells me that it's really an issue for everyone, and any industry, any company, and so on. And second, it's also something that we haven't really solved yet. And so for us, it's really about, okay, what can we do in that space? And there we want to share an example, a very small example that we're currently working on, but I hope that's also useful for you. So quick intro, myself is Christian, my name is Christian Niederauer. I'm working for Col-Pal. Globally, I'm responsible for insights, and in that regard also responsible for knowledge management. I'm happy that Olaf Lenzmann from our partner MarketLogic is joining us today. And Olaf, I mean, your title is Chief Innovation and Product Officer. So yeah, what is someone like you doing?
It's a bit of a mouthful. So I'm co-founder also of MarketLogic, and I'm responsible for product and also for all the innovation that we're working on, specifically now with partners like Colgate and with Christian to push the envelope forward and to try and find new ways of leveraging the information that you have amassed in the future for ongoing business decisions.
Great, good. So let's start with where we started. So I call it, or I recently just started calling it, the more less dilemma. So the thing is, we have basically more information than ever in the past, which is great, that's good. We have also more questions because there's these concepts of data-driven decision-making. People finally understand people centricity is something that's really useful and so on, so also great. The issue is we have less insights or insights people. And that's not because we had a lot of people leaving the functions, we had reduced headcounts. That's also true in some parts of the industry. But I think it's also because we now also share resources, because now there are also data scientists, data engineers working with all the data that we have, knowledge managers. So therefore, you have less people that are really then therefore there to really distill the insights. And that's the problem, because more information, more questions, but less people really working on it. That usually does result in something that's not a good space. So is knowledge management therefore a way out? And we first thought, yeah, it is, because in the end, I mean, if you capture all the knowledge, then we should get to something like corporate learning, which is a good starting point. But like the image shows, I think we were therefore even more busy or busier with now trying to capture all the insights, making sure they are stored in the right way and so on, and therefore forgot on the way that we doing all of that stuff only to generate more and better insights. That's something with less people, or with less people really focused on that one, was also difficult. So therefore, is knowledge management a way out? It can be. It's definitely necessary as a first starting point, but it's not really the final solution for it. Maybe some facts about our knowledge management platform. So we started with that way before I started at Colgate, so you might know it when we started with it, but it's definitely a long time ago. We have around 14 to 20,000, it really depends on how you define it, research documents in there, PDFs, PPTs, Excel files, and so on. We have about 100,000 plus secondary data reports from our partners like MarketLogic, and not MarketLogic, Euromonitor, Mintel, Kantar, you name it, and so on. And overall, when we roughly calculated, we have around about $400 million worth of insights assets, which is great, because I mean, just imagine somebody tells you tomorrow your insights budget is 400 million. I mean, you could do a lot of things with that and answer a lot of questions. But the main issue still remains. We want to democratize insights. We have all that knowledge available, but it's so much information that nobody can really process it. So that old stat from McKinsey that says employees or knowledge employees are really having 20% of their daily work is just dedicated to finding information or searching information, not even finding, because there's no stat about finding, and people are searching 20% of their time. I hope that at least half of them also find what they need, but it's not always the case. So therefore, it's really literally like finding the needle in the haystack. So therefore, the whole idea of insights democratization, so making everything available to everyone, is in principle a great idea, but you have to do it in a way that it's also digestible and that people find what they're looking for. And the example that we showed today was basically coming from, we've done a lot of people journeys, consumer decision journeys, however you call it in your companies or in your area. And we conducted around about 20 to 30 of them all together, all on oral care, but all in different countries, all on different segments of oral care. And then each journey answered a very specific business question for a very specific team. They worked with it, they really activated. But then when global folks like myself or then partners in crime, like stakeholders in global functions, and ask simple questions, we already have to say, I don't know. I can't find it out. I have to look through 30 research reports. I will maybe come to an answer. But it takes a lot of time, and I don't have time for that. So therefore, when easy questions were then coming up, what is the role of our websites in the whole decision journey for whitening products, for example? I said, I have no clue. I can find it. And then I said, yeah, in Mexico for whitening, that's the role. That's more important than the professional recommendation and so on. But, okay, I don't know how that stacks up with other things. So therefore, we needed something to really distill all of that information. That's when market logic came to play, as they have all that information already in their system. And then I basically challenged Olaf, say, okay, yeah, give me a solution for that. So just tell me how I can do my job better, or how can my team do a better job by answering these questions.
Exactly, and that's where we come in, and that's also what we see from across our base of clients and customers to be a big opportunity and incurring a lot of opportunity cost, the way the world works today, which is, as Christian said, there's a lot of insights and information that is captured in the systems, but it's not quite trivial to get to it. It's not quite trivial to get it in the way you need it, to get it at the level of abstraction you need it, and to get it fast. So we believe that AI by now has reached a stage of maturity where it can really make significant contributions to solve that problem. It cannot solve any problem, but it can solve some problems. And what we set out to do there, what we wanted to accomplish is two things. On the one hand, use the AI to enable business users who have questions to ask them in a very simple way and get an answer very quickly that they can consume and interact with and that makes sense to them and that leads them on to further information. And so make it much more accessible and approachable, what is existing already. And on the other hand, really focus on the expert side from going back, rereading all these documents, trying to compile the findings and sending them back through email, which is still what a lot of the reality is like today. So that's what we started to do, and then we at Market Logic already about a year ago initiated a project to evaluate that, but then also we worked with Christian together, and our focus, our square objective was to take all the lovely information that's already there, like all the reports from the consumer journeys, and throw them at the AI without any further manual intervention and try to answer questions, real-world questions that people would answer the team of Christian with the AI. And we've been using AI that you may know, like GPT-2, 3, Lambda, whatever it's all talked about these days, this kind of large language models which now have quite a good grasp and understanding of how human language works. And around these technologies we built a prototypical and then a pilot solution. And we took in about 1,000 pages of this research around this specific subject matter area, and then we set out to have a set of real-world questions coming from the business, evaluating them qualitatively, quantitatively, to get a feeling for how good is that really. And to give you an example, and unfortunately the beamer doesn't display the gray shade quite beautifully, what you could do is you could ask a question like, how often do people use whitening products, and is that different by country or by demographic area? And then you count to 3 maybe, and what you could get back from the AI is a response that by inspecting all the content that's in the system, trawling through all the findings, through all the documents, finds the most relevant pieces speaking to your question and then summarizes them, not like just pulling out text as it's there, but summarizes them into an easy to consume answer, which you see at the middle, which maybe talks about how they would use it and more sporadically than toothpaste, etc. And it then can also generate further recommendations saying, hey, you may want to look at especially this kind of report, look at page 69, it discusses this aspect of usage behavior, which is exactly relevant for what you want to understand. And we strongly believe that this kind of interaction will be very valuable and will take a lot of time from the experts, and by virtue of being very natural in the interaction, you just ask a question and get an answer instead of punching keywords into search boxes and opening PDFs. It will be much more accepted by business users, and you can serve it through so many different channels to a user. You could ask Alexa even in theory. So AI is great, but also, like Vanessa said, it's not perfect. So things are working well, and some things are not working quite so well yet. But of course, technology only gets better. That's the beauty of it. So what works very well already is going through, if you push once more, thanks, going through all the reports, picking out really the relevant findings, the relevant bits you can reproduce for those answers, and weeding out things like verbatim quotes from consumers, which of course, if you were to take them literally as the truth to generate an answer, may produce hilarious results, but are deeply wrong. That works very well. What doesn't work yet is interpreting really all those lovely infographics and visual representations with arrows indicating what's more important or less important. That is still a little bit further down the road. What we can do very well with the technology is answer general concept questions, answer anything where we find relevant content. We can generate great recommendations. Where we still are at the edge of it, so to speak, is if it comes to very nuanced question about specific target groups in specific situations and you don't find good information, then the main job is to prevent the AI from trying to be too smart and overgeneralize. And lastly, very important also for many of our international customers, this technology works across languages pretty much. So you can ask an English question and will read, so to speak, the French and German reports and come back with an answer for you in English again without you having to necessarily go into that. What it doesn't do yet is any meta-learnings or further new insight synthesis across. It rather relies on what is there already. So that's what we have. And where do we want to go? We think about AI not as like the super intelligence that somehow magically connects dots that no human could ever see. Rather, we think of it as a good enough intelligence, but one that you can scale now. And so you can do things which you couldn't do before simply because you wouldn't have the resources. So imagine, for example, people ask questions to the system and we provide answers. And then maybe we track who has asked which question when, and we maybe automatically check for any kind of new information coming in and can distribute that automatically and say, hey, you have asked this business question 6 weeks ago. Here's a relevant update that just came in yesterday, and you should look at page 25 for what really talks to what you wanted to know.
Yeah.
So
and I think that last aspect is very important, because very often we get questions way ahead of the business decision, and then you provide some information, but then nobody asks you again, because then they base their business decision on it. And if they're sent 6 weeks, 8 weeks later, then we might have updated information. And therefore, currently, nobody is following up. And that's a very good use case where AI can come into play and just say, okay, I know somebody asked that question, so therefore I will provide that additional information or that updated information also to these stakeholders. So basically, a very easy way to get to one-to-many communication models.
Thank you so
Good.
much.
Thank you.
Great project.
Thank you.